Ladies and gentlemen, behind every earthly event lies a deeper, invisible struggle in the spiritual realm, a war that shapes destinies. There is a realm beyond what your eyes can see, a reality hidden from human sight, yet more real than the ground beneath your feet. In that realm, forces move and clash, shaping the events of the world without the knowledge of those who dwell in the natural. What you witness on the surface, wars, divisions, moral collapse, is but the shadow of something deeper, something older, something eternal. From the dawn of creation, the battle lines were drawn, not with swords of steel, but with the decrees of the Most High and the rebellion of the adversary. Every kingdom that has risen and fallen has played a part in this war, whether they knew it or not. The rulers of the earth have been swayed by unseen hands, sometimes to fulfill the purposes of heaven, sometimes to resist them. When a law is passed that stands against the ways of God, there is a spiritual root. When truth is silenced and lies are exalted, there is a spiritual architect behind it. The earthly actors may not know whose cause they serve, but their words and actions are echoes of a greater conflict raging above and around them. The prophets of old spoke of this invisible war. They saw beyond armies and empires, speaking of principalities and powers that inhabit the heavenly places. They revealed that the mightiest kings were but pawns in the hands of forces they could not command. And what was true in the days of Daniel and Isaiah is no less true in this hour. You feel the pressure even now, though you cannot see its source. The confusion, the division, the unrest in the nations, these are the tremors of a battle waged in the spiritual realm. The unseen war manifests in the breaking of families, the corruption of truth, and the turning of hearts away from their Maker. When you walk through life unaware of this reality, you are like a soldier on a battlefield without armor, without weapons, and without understanding the enemy's tactics. The unseen war demands that you awaken, that you open your eyes to discern the schemes laid against you, and that you recognize the source of the opposition you face. In this battle, neutrality does not exist. To ignore it is to surrender without resistance. Every day, choices align you either with the kingdom of light or with the realm of darkness. The unseen war presses upon every decision, every thought, every allegiance you make. The enemy works in subtlety, for he thrives in secrecy. He cloaks his movements in cultural trends, political agendas, and personal temptations. He presents chains as freedom, poison as sweetness, destruction as progress. Without spiritual discernment, the war remains invisible and the snare unnoticed until it is too late. But as the times grow darker, the veil thins. The line between good and evil, truth and falsehood, becomes more visible to those who have eyes to see. The shaking in the nations is not random. It is the clashing of two kingdoms, each advancing toward its appointed end. The unseen war is not fought by flesh and blood. Its battleground is the human heart. Its weapons are not of this world, and its victories are measured in souls reclaimed from darkness. The outcome in your life depends on whether you stand as a passive bystander or as an active warrior in the cause of truth. Every headline, every crisis, every cultural shift is connected to this ancient conflict. You were born into it without choice, but you are not powerless within it. The forces arrayed against you are great, but the one who calls you to stand is greater still. The unseen war rages on, whether acknowledged or denied, and its tides are rising in this very hour. The days ahead will demand that you see beyond the visible, that you interpret the events of the world through the lens of the eternal, and that you prepare yourself to engage in the struggle that determines the course of nations and the destiny of souls from the dawn of human history. There has been a cunning adversary moving in the shadows, studying the ways of man and seeking to twist what was meant for good. His strategies are as old as the garden, yet they adapt to each generation. disguising themselves in the language, culture, and desires of the time. The ancient enemy does not always wage war openly. He often advances his cause by subtlety, planting seeds of doubt and confusion where there was once clarity and truth. His goal is not simply to destroy but to distort, to turn the heart away from the source of life. He understands the weaknesses of humanity, for he has observed them for millennia. Pride, fear, lust, greed, these become the entry points through which his schemes take root. He knows that if the foundation of faith can be cracked, the entire structure will be vulnerable. One of his primary tactics is deception, for if he can convince the world to accept a lie as truth, he can lead entire nations astray without drawing a sword. This is why the battle is as much for the mind as for the body. The enemy often mirrors the language of light while twisting its meaning, creating a counterfeit that appears righteous yet leads to destruction. He knows that the most dangerous lies are those wrapped in fragments of truth. Division is another weapon in his arsenal, for he understands that a house divided against itself cannot stand. By turning brother against brother, community against community, he weakens the unity that was meant to withstand his assaults. He uses the passage of time to dull spiritual vigilance, lulling people into complacency until they no longer recognize the slow erosion of their convictions. What begins as compromise becomes bondage. Fear is his chain, but distraction is his snare. If he can keep the eyes of the faithful fixed on the temporary instead of the eternal, their strength will be drained before the real battle begins. He is patient, willing to wait for the opportune moment to strike. Like a predator stalking prey, he watches for the moment of weakness when defenses are down and resolve is wavering. The enemy works not only through individuals but through systems, weaving his influence into the fabric of culture, government, and even religion, so that his reach extends far beyond the obvious. Yet his strategy, though ancient and clever, is built on the same foundation. It always has been: a rebellion against the truth, a war against the Creator's order, and a desire to be enthroned in place of the Most High. He has not changed his ultimate aim, for from the beginning his plan has been to steal what does not belong to him, to kill what he cannot control, and to destroy what he cannot own. The nations of the earth are like the hands of a great clock, moving according to patterns set long ago, turning in alignment with forces that most never perceive. Borders shift, alliances form and crumble, leaders rise and fall, and yet behind the motions there is a hidden design. History is not random. The events that shake the nations are part of a tapestry that has been unfolding since the beginning. Empires have always been more than political entities. They are vessels for spiritual currents, channels through which unseen powers influence the destiny of peoples. Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome did not simply emerge. They were shaped, empowered, and guided by forces beyond the material realm, forces either aligned with heaven or set against it. The same is true in your day. When a nation exalts righteousness, it is no accident, and when it plunges into corruption, that too is not without cause. The moral climate of a people reflects the spiritual influence at work within their borders. Laws that honor the Creator are resisted by those who seek to dethrone him, and laws that reject his ways are celebrated by those in rebellion against his rule. The shifting of power among nations often coincides with prophetic patterns. Ancient warnings given to Israel and echoed through the ages still speak to the modern world. When nations turn from the ways of God, they invite instability, division, and calamity. What was written as history becomes a living pattern, repeating in the headlines of today. The rise of conflict is a sign, for war between nations mirrors the greater war in the spirit. When alliances fracture, when peace treaties dissolve, when the drums of war grow louder, it reflects the agitation of the unseen realm, where the adversary stirs nations toward chaos to advance his schemes Economic upheaval is also a sign. When markets collapse, when currencies falter, when the wealth of nations shifts in sudden waves, it is often the outward manifestation of an invisible shaking. The scriptures speak of such times when wealth will be gathered and transferred, when the treasures of the nations will no longer rest securely in the hands that hold them. Even natural disasters can carry significance for those who discern. Earthquakes, famines, plagues, these have often been instruments through which the Creator calls the attention of nations, shaking their confidence in themselves, reminding them of their fragility, summoning them to repentance. The moral decay of a society is perhaps the most telling sign. When a nation celebrates what was once shameful and shames what was once honorable, when truth is traded for lies and justice is perverted, it reveals that the heart of that nation has shifted under the weight of a different spirit. The treatment of Israel remains a measure among the nations. Those who seek her destruction align themselves with the same spirit that has opposed the purposes of God since the days of Pharaoh and Haman. Those who bless her walk in a blessing not of their own making, a promise woven into the fabric of history. Global movements that unite nations in common cause may seem noble on the surface, yet they can also serve as vehicles for a hidden agenda. When unity is pursued apart from truth, when the gathering of nations seeks to cast off the authority of heaven, it becomes the very fulfillment of the ancient psalm that spoke of kings and rulers taking counsel together against the Lord and his anointed. The signs in the nations are not for curiosity alone. They are indicators of where the world stands in the unfolding of the great plan. The movements of armies, the rise and fall of economies, the moral direction of societies all point toward the convergence of events long foretold. Every headline, every geopolitical shift, every global crisis is a thread in the larger design. For those who have eyes to see, the signs in the nations are like the writing on the wall, declaring that the appointed times are drawing near and that the great clash of kingdoms is advancing toward its appointed hour. The testing of the faithful is not an accident, but a certainty written into the journey of those who walk with the Almighty. Just as gold must pass through the fire to be purified, so too must the children of God be tried, not to destroy them, but to refine them until their faith shines with a brilliance that cannot be forged in comfort. In the days of old, the patriarchs faced trials that tested not only their endurance, but their trust in the one who called them. Abraham was asked to lay down his promised son. Joseph was betrayed and thrown into a pit. Daniel stood alone in the courts of kings. Each was faced with a choice to either trust or turn away, to endure or to surrender. Testing reveals what is hidden in the heart. Words of devotion are easy when the skies are clear, but in the storm every motive is exposed. When the ground beneath shakes, when prayers seem unanswered, when the way forward is obscured, it is then that the reality of faith is revealed. The faithful are not exempt from trials. In fact, they are often chosen for them. The enemy knows that if he can crush the faith of the righteous, he can dim the light they carry. Yet what he intends for destruction, the Creator transforms into the very means by which his people are strengthened and prepared for greater purposes. The wilderness is a place of testing. It strips away the illusions of self-sufficiency, forcing reliance on the one who alone can provide. In the wilderness, Israel learned that bread does not come merely from the earth, but from the word and will of God. In your own wilderness seasons, the same lesson is offered, though the cost is the surrender of control. Testing often comes through loss. The removal of what was trusted, the breaking of what seemed unshakable, the closing of doors once thought to be open forever, all become the crucible in which faith is proven. It is in the absence of visible hope that invisible trust is forged. The faithful may be tested through delay. Promises given may seem to tarry. Visions shown may fade with time, and yet the waiting is not without purpose. In the delay, the heart learns perseverance. the spirit learns to stand without sight, and the soul learns that the timing of heaven is perfect. Sometimes the testing comes in abundance rather than lack. Prosperity can test the heart as severely as hardship, for in times of plenty it is easy to forget the one who gave the increase. The test is whether blessings will become idols or remain tools for service to the king. The testing of the faithful often includes standing alone. The pressure to compromise, to blend into the culture, to silence truth for the sake of acceptance, is a furnace that few willingly enter. Yet those who stand, though they appear to lose much, are counted among the overcomers who will one day shine like the stars. Even relationships can become arenas of testing. Betrayals, misunderstandings, and rejection can wound deeply, tempting the heart to withdraw. Yet in such moments the call is to forgive, to love without condition, and to entrust justice into the hands of the righteous judge. Every test carries the opportunity for growth. The fire that consumes the dross also strengthens the vessel. The very pressures that seem unbearable are shaping the faithful into those who can carry the weight of the glory to come. Those who endure the testing will emerge with a faith that cannot be shaken by the storms ahead, for they have already learned to trust in the midst of the tempest and to walk forward when all they could see was the promise spoken by the voice of the one they follow. The armor of light is not fashioned by human hands, but woven by the Spirit of God, forged in the fires of truth, righteousness, and faith. It is given to those who walk in the day and refuse to hide in the shadows, for the darkness trembles at its presence. Light exposes what darkness seeks to conceal. When one is clothed in the armor of light, no hidden scheme of the enemy can remain unseen. It becomes both a defense and a weapon, for it blinds the adversary and illuminates the path for the one who wears it. The breastplate of righteousness in the armor of light shields the heart from the lies that seek to corrupt it. It is not a righteousness earned by works, but one received from the Holy One, a covering that no accusation can penetrate. The belt of truth holds the entire armor in place, for without truth, even light can be twisted by deception. Truth is what steadies the believer in the midst of a world built on shifting shadows and fading illusions. The shield of faith in the armor of light is not merely to deflect arrows, but to extinguish them. Every flaming dart of fear, doubt, and despair loses its fire when it strikes against the unyielding trust in the one who cannot fail. The helmet of salvation guards the mind, for the battle often begins in the thoughts. The enemy whispers words of hopelessness and condemnation, but the knowledge of salvation silences every voice that speaks contrary to the promises of God. The footwear of peace in the armor of light allows the faithful to move forward without fear of the terrain. Whether the path is smooth or filled with thorns, the one who walks in peace remains steady, carrying the message of hope into the darkest corners of the earth. The sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, is the only offensive weapon in the armor of light, yet it is sharper than any earthly blade. It cuts through lies, dismantles strongholds, and speaks life into places marked by death. To wear the armor of light is to be visible in a world that loves the cover of night. It means standing as a beacon that others may see and follow, even when the light draws the attention and attacks of those who hate it. This armor is not heavy, for it is born in the strength of the Spirit. The more it is worn, the more natural it becomes, until the believer moves in it as effortlessly as breathing, fully protected, fully equipped. The armor of light is not meant to be taken off, for the battle is not seasonal but constant. Every moment lived in the light is a moment lived in readiness, for the enemy does not rest. Those who wear the armor of light become living testimonies of the victory of the kingdom, shining not with their own brilliance, but with the reflection of the eternal light that no darkness can overcome. There are moments in history when the breach in the wall becomes visible, when the defenses have been weakened, and the enemy's shadow looms large over the land. It is in such moments that the call goes forth, not to the multitudes, but to the few who will hear and respond, to stand in the gap. Standing in the gap is not a place of comfort or safety. It is a place of exposure, where the winds of opposition strike hardest, and the eyes of heaven and hell are fixed upon those who take their place. The one who stands in the gap does so not for their own sake, but for the sake of others. They intercede, they plead, they lift up prayers like incense rising to the throne, seeking mercy for a people who may not even know they are in peril. In the ancient days, the watchman on the wall had to remain awake through the darkest hours, for it was in the night that the enemy most often came. So it is now, those called to the gap must be vigilant, for the hour is late, and the attacks are subtle and relentless. To stand in the gap is to step into the role of a shield, taking the blows meant for another, bearing the weight of intercession until the breakthrough comes. It is a call that demands both courage and endurance. The gap is the place where heaven's purposes confront the forces of destruction. It is the narrow space where light meets darkness, where the intercessor becomes a living bridge between God's mercy and the people's need. Those who stand in the gap are often unseen by men, yet they are known by heaven. Their prayers echo in eternity, shaping events, shifting destinies, and turning back judgments that seemed certain. The call to the gap is not answered with mere words, but with a life surrendered. It is to be willing to bear the burden of the Lord's heart, to feel his grief over the sins of the people, and to cry out for his mercy even when judgment seems deserved. In the gap, there is no room for divided loyalty. The one who stands must be fully aligned with the purposes of the kingdom, unmoved by the voices of fear or compromise. Standing in the gap is not about human strength. It is sustained only by the power of the Spirit. Without that power, the weight would crush the one who answers the call. The gap is a place of both warfare and hope warfare because the enemy will resist every prayer, and hope because every moment spent there is a step toward victory. The call to stand in the gap is sounding now, as the breaches widen and the walls of the nation grow thin, seeking those who will not turn away, who will take their place until the battle is won. There are times appointed when what has stood for generations will be shaken, when the ground beneath the feet of nations will tremble, and the illusions they have trusted in will be torn away. A shaking does not come without purpose. It comes to reveal what is real and to remove what cannot endure. The shaking begins subtly, like the first tremors before a great earthquake, unnoticed by most, but felt by those who are watchful. It is a divine disturbance, unsettling the comfort of those who have grown numb to the truth. When the shaking comes, it will test every foundation. That which has been built on sand will collapse under the weight of the storm, but that which is anchored in the rock will remain, even as everything else crumbles around it. It is written that once more God will shake not only the earth but also the heavens, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. This shaking will touch every realm, political, economic, spiritual, and no power of man will be able to stop it. For many, the shaking will seem like chaos and destruction, but for those who understand, it is the hand of mercy, tearing down false altars so that truth may be revealed. The shaking exposes hidden corruption, the secret sins that have been covered for years. It is the light breaking into the darkness, forcing what is concealed into the open. Nations will be shaken, but so will the hearts of individuals. The events in the world will not only affect governments and kings, but also the inner chambers of the soul, compelling each one to choose where they stand. The shaking strips away idols, those things people have relied on more than God. Wealth, power, fame, security. All will be shown for what they are, unable to stand in the day of testing. Those who are prepared will not fear the shaking. Instead, they will see it as the confirmation that the time of transformation has come. They will understand that the shaking is not to destroy them, but to align them with the unshakable kingdom. In the midst of the shaking, voices will rise, some to spread fear and confusion, and others to point to the hope that remains. The choice of which voice to follow will determine the outcome for many. The coming shaking will demand that every person, every nation, and every power face the question, what is your foundation? For when the shaking ends, only what is built on eternal truth will still be standing. The signs are already here, the tremors already felt, warning that the time is near when everything that can be shaken will be shaken, and the unshakable alone will remain before the foundations of the earth were laid. A plan was already set in motion. A victory sealed before the first battle was fought. It was written in the hidden counsels of eternity, a script inscribed by the author of all history. The triumph was not an afterthought or a reaction to evil. It was the destiny woven into creation itself. Every event, every trial, every tear was already known and measured in the light of the final outcome. In the scrolls of heaven, the end was declared from the beginning, and that end was not defeat, but the absolute overthrow of darkness. The forces that now rage and roar were already doomed from the moment they rose. From Eden to the present hour, every shadow of failure and every seeming victory of evil has been permitted only to serve a greater purpose. The triumph was hidden within the very fabric of the struggle. The prophets spoke of it in fragments and visions, seeing glimpses of a day when every chain would be broken, when the oppressor's scepter would be shattered, and when the king's reign would be established forever. This victory is not the result of chance, nor is it in doubt. It is the culmination of an unshakable decree that cannot be altered by man, angel, or demon. It is the outcome toward which all of history has been moving. Even in the darkest hours, when it seemed as though the light had been extinguished, the hidden script was still unfolding exactly as it had been ordained. The silence of heaven was not abandonment, but the pause before the breaking of dawn. The triumph is not simply an event to be witnessed, but a reality to be entered into. Those who align themselves with the author's purpose are invited to walk in the assurance of a victory that has already been secured. Every battle, every trial, every shaking becomes part of the march toward that appointed day, when what was written from the beginning will stand visible before every eye. The enemy's fury is not a sign of his power, but of his desperation, for he knows that the decree stands and the outcome cannot be reversed. The closer the triumph comes, the louder the resistance will grow. The faithful are called to remember that they are not fighting for victory, but from victory, standing in the shadow of a completed work that was decided before the first stone of creation was set. The triumph is not only a conclusion, it is a revelation that the one who authored the beginning holds the end in his hand, and the story from first word to last is his.